Welcome to this adventure driving the Cottonwood and Cottonwood Creek Road in southwestern Utah, just north of St. George, Utah. Now, we drove this road in April, and as far as I can tell on Onyx, it is actually two roads, Cottonwood and Cottonwood Creek, but I'll just refer to everything as Cottonwood Road since it's all one road. Now, I always forget to take some video of us before we start the road, but here's at least a picture of us. St. George, Utah is a long ways to drive our Jeep from East Tennessee. So what we did is we flew into Vegas and rented a Jeep there. Most people fly into Vegas to do the casinos and shows, but we went there to rent a Jeep and go to St. George. We rented the Jeep from Vegas Jeep Tours. It was a Jeep Wrangler Willys. It was a great Jeep. The folks there were very friendly, very helpful, so recommend them highly. Disadvantage of renting a Jeep locally is that you don't have all the recovery gear, but we were not planning to do any real difficult trails where we might get stuck and no one come by. And we did have satellite communication via T-Mobile and thanks also to Elon Musk, so we could at least text somebody and maybe tweet while we were stuck. Here is a map of Cottonwood Road. They're traced in red. Interestingly, this is an area where the northern part of the Mojave Desert and western part of the Colorado Plateau, eastern part of the Great Basin meet. So there's just a great variety of terrain and climate and vegetation. Part of the road runs through the Red Cliffs National Conservation Area, but most of it is north of that. The road is about 29 miles long, rated 2 out of 10 on Onyx, which is relatively easy. Our Jeep Wrangler Willys must have felt a little embarrassed, probably wanted to look at us and say, this is it. Maybe part of the challenge was just not wanting to stop every 5 minutes to take pictures of the beautiful scenery. Now, there are some shelf roads on the east side, which gives a little bit more adventure. Nothing wakes you up like knowing you're just a few feet away from making the evening news. So we ran the road starting on the west end, and Cottonwood Road begins just on the northeast side of St. George. As noted in a subtitle on the video earlier, there's a short segment of pavement before the road becomes gravel. And then the road ends just north of Leeds, Utah, near Interstate 515. Arguably, it might have been an advantage to drive the road starting on the east end to avoid driving into the sun, but on the other hand, when we finished the road, it was after 10 o'clock, and a highly interesting museum, the Silver Reef Mining Museum, was open, and I highly recommend going to that. Now, the road itself is well maintained. The highest point is about 4,760 feet, lowest point about 3,090 feet. You could do it in just a regular street vehicle, in my opinion. As you can see from the video, the first few miles of the road, starting from St. George, is pretty flat and pretty wide, so we don't need to spend a whole lot of time looking at this part of the road. It's hard to see the two piles of rock on the left, but I believe those are piles of blocks of lava, and there were several lava flows that we ran across on the road. And of course, for some people, a road sign in a rural area is just irresistible for target practice. And here on the road, we must have gained enough elevation to be able to see a few more trees. The road gets a little bit more interesting from here on. And here we get to go over a cattle guard, which I always find interesting for some reason. Where I grew up in Iowa, we didn't have cattle guards, but then again, we didn't have open rangeland either. There to the left of the road, you can see that black rock, which is more lava flow. The changes in vegetation in just a few miles on the road is just very amazing. Here we are in a kind of a scrub forest of juniper and pinyon pine, I believe. This might be a good time to talk a little bit about the history of the area. Now, like most of southern Utah and the broader region, the area was inhabited for thousands of years by indigenous people, including the ancestral Puebloans and southern Paiute. Now, the exact construction date of the road itself is difficult to pin down, but apparently the route has roots in the pioneering era. The area north of St. George was settled by Mormon pioneers beginning in the 1860s as part of the Church of Latter-day Saints' efforts to grow cotton in the warmer parts of Utah. I think that was because of the fear that the Civil War that was going on might cut access to cotton from the Confederate States. You can judge for yourself whether that effort was totally successful, since when you think of Utah, you don't think of cotton. And wagon routes from St. George connected with the outlying communities and with the ranches and grazing lands in the Pine Valley Mountains. The modern Cottonwood Road, of course, evolved from those earlier ranching and utility access roads. The road itself serves several purposes: access to Bureau of Land Management lands, and to numerous trails for hiking, mountain biking, horseback riding, and also to some water infrastructure on the eastern side that carries mountain water to St. George, and there's some other utility corridors apparently. In the past, it also provided access to a quarry that provided stones for buildings at St. George. It is also quite possible that the Civilian Conservation Corps built or improved part of the road, since they were very active in road building in the 1930s and operated heavily in southern Utah. As you can see, the scenery along the road is just so beautiful, and a big reason for it is the underlying geology. When you think about it, you're driving through about 200 million years of geologic history when you drive the road, and you do that in just 2 hours. Near the St. George start of the road, there are some cinder cones you can see, and in that same area there's a number of basalt lava flows. But the dominant rock along the road is Jurassic Age Navajo sandstone. According to geologists, about 190 million years ago, this area was a huge desert, enormous sand dunes, and those dunes became the Navajo sandstones. So if you think Utah is dry today, it's nothing compared to back then. And then on top of some of those sandstones lies the lava flows. And to the north of the road are the Pine Valley Mountains, and those are a little unusual in that they were formed from a mammoth volcanic intrusion of magma, and that magma pushed the land upwards more than 10,000 feet in parts, and that's what's formed the mountains. Geologists do call this magma intrusion a laccolith, but to us lay people, it's just those big mountains over there. Now, because the road passes through parts of the Mojave Desert, the Great Basin, Colorado Plateau, those have big differences in elevation and precipitation, so consequently there's a big diversity of plants and animals. For plants, the desert plants include agaves and yuccas, creosote bushes, various cacti, Mormon tea, desert globe mallow, some scrub oak, and others. And then the higher elevations, you'll see some junipers and pinyon pine and other shrubs of the Colorado Plateau. We had hoped to see some animals, some larger animals, at least some mule deer, but I guess they had the day off. Have read that the area is home to the Mojave Desert turtle, as well as Gila monsters, various lizards, mule deer, coyotes, bobcats, foxes, etc. But we didn't see any of those. We did see some flowers along the road, and here's some photos of them with my best guess as to what they are. We really did enjoy driving Cottonwood Road. We had a lot of fun. It was very interesting. But a bonus was when we finished the road near Leeds on the east side of the road, because we found that there is something called the Silver Reef Mining District, and that's just west of Leeds. And that is geologically a very unique area because it has silver deposits in sandstone. And according to the info that I could find, it's the only place in the world where silver was mined from unaltered sandstone. Experts back in the days, around 1860, refused to believe that there could be significant silver in deposits because you just don't find silver in sandstone. But eventually they grudgingly conceded that, yeah, it was there. So here's a little bit of history that in 1866, high-grade silver chloride ore was discovered just west of Leeds. And then 1876 to 1888, that was the principal mining time, and that district produced over 7 million ounces of silver by 1910. That would be worth about $500 million today. And amazingly, when you find silver, things change very quickly. So that area went from a remote desert to being very civilized. The ore contained about 20 to 50 ounces of silver per ton, and the mine depth was generally shallow, relatively shallow, about less than 350 feet. Occurred in lens-shaped ore bodies about 200 to 300 feet long and up to 20 feet thick. Why did the silver occur in these sandstones when, according to experts, it really shouldn't be there? Well, again, as mentioned earlier, the silver occurs as silver chloride, which is also called orange silver. And apparently geologists believe that those metals were leached, at least the silver metal was leached from volcanic ash beds underneath the sandstone. And that mineral-rich groundwater then moved up into the porous sandstone and was trapped there, and somehow organic material helped precipitate those metals in the sandstone. And although the whole area is full of these sandstones, apparently it's just in this area that had the right conditions to get these silver formations. The United States Geological Survey and Utah Geological Survey have assessed this area for other mineral deposits, but have deemed it to be low potential, but possibly in the future maybe some moderate potential for finding oil, additional silver, gas, uranium, and vanadium. And we actually managed to meet another car coming from the other direction, which you can see is just a normal street vehicle. We were probably about a half hour into the drive. The road here goes along a very beautiful canyon. I should have taken our action cam and done some video, but I just wasn't thinking. But I did manage to take some still photos that you can see. There is an interesting formation called elephant skin on part of the rock. I tried later to figure out what's the name of this canyon. It was a little difficult since I wasn't sure exactly where I was, but as far as I can tell, it's part of the Cottonwood Canyon system. Although there's a lot of Cottonwood canyons in the area, in the region, so I could be wrong. If anybody knows better, just please let me know. And this has got to be the most beautiful part of the trail. Canyon on the right with the red rocks, the mountains in the background, a beautiful blue sky, sunlight's just at the right angle. We could come back here again just to see this. And another thrilling cattle guard to go over. It might be the most technical part of the trail, I don't know. But then we found ourselves in a surprisingly very green, well-watered, verdant area. We did not anticipate finding this here. Going through a really wooded area, pasture land. This shelf road is the last of the shelf roads, albeit very moderate shelf road. The road is plenty wide, no problem passing an oncoming vehicle. And from here, it's all downhill into the town of Leeds. You might notice some of the trees or branches, limbs moving. When we went over the last hill, the wind really picked up. And boy, down in the town of Leeds, the wind was very ferocious. Yeah, we encountered a little bit of a traffic jam with two big semis pulling some heavy construction equipment up the hill. Not a real problem. We just waited patiently for them to do their thing. We're just glad that we ran across them here rather than a little bit farther where the road becomes very narrow. We would have had to back up a little bit. This is pretty much the end of Cottonwood Road. We are almost to the town of Leeds. Not the most difficult trail in the world by any means, but it's very beautiful. We enjoyed it. We did take the opportunity to visit the Silver Reef Mining Museum on the north side of Leeds. Very interesting. The guides were tremendous, very entertaining. They could have made doing your taxes sound wonderful. And then 1 or 2 days later, we found ourselves on the 23rd floor of the Waldorf Astoria in Las Vegas enjoying afternoon tea. Well, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and if so, please give it a thumbs up.